You are 26 years old and you are grading papers at a community college in Charlottesville, Virginia, when your phone rings at 11:14 on a Tuesday night. You teach introductory Arabic and Farsi to undergraduates who mostly signed up because they thought languages would be easier than calculus. You are good at your job. You are also fluent in 4 languages, hold a master's degree in international relations from Georgetown, ran track competitively until your junior year, and have a memory that your professors described, variously, as photographic, unsettling, and wasted. You have been told, more than once, that you are in the wrong place. You have never been entirely sure what the right place was. The call is from a number you don't recognize. The man on the other end introduces himself only by a first name. He tells you that a student of yours, a 22-year-old named Daniel who sat in the 3rd row and asked unusually precise questions about Farsi verb conjugations, is not actually a student. He is an asset. He was being run by a case officer who is now in a hospital in Amman, Jordan, with 2 bullets in his shoulder. Daniel made contact with the man on the phone because Daniel had your number, and Daniel told them something about you that made them look at a file they apparently already had. The man on the phone asks if you can come to Washington on Thursday. He says it isn't optional, exactly, but that he'd prefer you come voluntarily. You grade the rest of the papers before you go to bed. You don't know why. It just seems important to finish what you started. Thursday changes everything. The building is unremarkable. The badge they give you is temporary. The woman who interviews you for 6 hours is not unremarkable. She is the most precise human being you have ever encountered, and she asks you questions that make it clear she already knows the answers and is measuring something else entirely. How you think. How you hold uncertainty. Whether you flinch when the stakes are named plainly. You do not flinch. At the end of the 6 hours, she slides a single sheet of paper across the table and tells you that the training program begins in 3 weeks and that you should not tell anyone where you are going, including the specific truth of where you are going. You can say government work. You can say consulting. She says most people choose consulting. You choose consulting. The farm, as it is called by people who have been there and never actually call it that in public, is in Virginia. You spend 8 months there, and by the end of it, you are a different architecture of the same person. You learn surveillance and counter-surveillance. You learn to build a cover identity the way a novelist builds a character. From the inside out, from the childhood memory that doesn't exist to the job history that can be verified by people who have been briefed to verify it. You learn dead drops and signal sites and how to assess a room in 4 seconds for exits, threats, and opportunities. You learn that intelligence work is not the thing movies say it is. It is slower and more bureaucratic and more dependent on relationships than any action sequence could communicate. The action, when it comes, is usually the sign that something has already gone wrong. Your instructors repeat this so many times it becomes a kind of catechism. The goal is never the dramatic moment. The goal is to prevent the dramatic moment from ever needing to happen. You graduate. If graduate is the right word for a process that ends with a quiet handshake and a new set of access codes, and you are assigned to the Directorate of Operations, which is where the case officers work, and you are posted to Beirut under diplomatic cover as a junior consular officer. Your cover is good. Your Arabic is better than good. It is native fluent in 2 dialects, and in Beirut this matters the way a key matters to a lock. You spend your first 6 months doing exactly what a junior consular officer would do, because your cover is only as strong as your commitment to it, and your commitment to it is total. You process visa applications. You attend receptions. You drink sparkling water at events where the other diplomats drink wine, not because of any rule but because you are always, at every event, working, and working requires the full use of the mind you brought to this job. Your first real operation is small by the standards of what comes later. There is a mid-level official in the Lebanese civil service who has access to financial records that the agency believes contain evidence of Hezbollah money laundering at a scale that matters to 3 different ongoing operations. The official's name is Mazen. He is 51 years old, has 2 daughters in university, drives a 10-year-old Peugeot, and eats lunch at the same cafe on Hammer Street every Tuesday and Thursday. You identify this pattern over 6 weeks of watching. You manufacture a reason to be at that cafe. You manufacture a reason to speak to him. You are, in your cover identity, a minor American bureaucrat interested in Lebanese administrative efficiency, a topic so boring that Mazen is slightly flattered to be asked about it by a foreigner, which is precisely the lever you identified. You meet 3 times over 5 weeks before you ask anything that matters. By the time you ask, He has already told you things he shouldn't have told anyone, not because you manipulated him into betrayal, but because you gave him the experience of being genuinely understood by someone who genuinely listened, and that experience is rarer than most people know, and humans move toward it the way plants move toward light. What Mazen gives you leads to the disruption of a financing network that the Analyst team later estimates was moving $32 million a year. You will never meet the analysts. You will never know most of what your information produced. This is the structural reality of intelligence work that nobody warns you about fully. You operate in fragments, and you are asked to trust that the fragments are part of something coherent even when the coherence is invisible to you. You trust. You continue. 3 years in Beirut. Then Istanbul. Then a difficult 18 months in Cairo that you are not permitted to describe in any document that has a classification below a level most people don't know exists. In Cairo, you make a decision in a stairwell at 2:37 in the morning that you will spend the next decade questioning, not because it was wrong, you are nearly certain it was right, but because certainty is in the stairwell at 2:37 in the morning and you had to act on probability and what you felt in your body when probability ran out. The man in the stairwell was an asset or a double. You made a call. The operation continued. You fly home for a week and you sit in your apartment in Arlington and you watch television for 6 hours a day and don't call anyone, and on day 7 you go back to work because the alternative is to stay in the apartment, and the apartment is not where the decision can be understood. By year 8 you are a senior case officer running your own network in a country whose name you write in reports using a cryptonym. You are responsible for 11 sources. You know their real names, their cover names, their families, their fears, their reasons for working with you. And their reasons are never simple, and they are never purely ideological, and they are never purely financial. People become sources for combinations of reasons that include pride and grievance and money and ideology and loneliness and the specific human need to matter to someone who is paying close attention. You pay close attention. This is your primary professional skill, and it is not separable from who you are as a person, which means the job has colonized the part of you that relates to other human beings, and you are aware of this, and you are not entirely sure what to do with the awareness. One of your 11 sources is compromised in year 9. You know it before headquarters confirms it. You know it from a 3-second shift in the way he answered a question about his schedule, a shift that you couldn't have named but that your body registered before your analysis did. You move to extract him. The extraction works. He is safe. The network survives. But the breach investigation reveals something that costs you 8 weeks of sleep and a relationship you cared about and a degree of trust in the institutional structure that you have to rebuild deliberately, brick by brick. Because without the institutional structure the work has no meaning, and the work is the only thing that is giving certain years their coherence. You are promoted into a senior analytical role at headquarters. The promotion is described as a recognition of your operational expertise. You understand it is also a way of protecting an asset pool that would be at risk if you continued field operations at the exposure level of the last 3 years. You accept the promotion. You sit at a desk in Langley, Virginia, and you read intelligence from 100 different sources, and you synthesize it into assessments that go to people whose names appear in newspapers, and the assessments shape decisions that affect millions of people who will never know a decision was made. This is the part of the job that requires a specific psychological architecture to inhabit. The architecture of the person who does consequential things invisibly and accepts that the invisibility is not incidental but essential, that the work only works because nobody knows it is happening. You are 41 years old when you sit across from a Senate Intelligence Committee member in a closed session and brief him on an operation that, if it succeeds, will prevent a specific kind of catastrophe in a specific region that you cannot name in this narrative. He asks you how confident you are. You tell him the honest answer. Confident enough to recommend proceeding, not confident enough to promise outcomes, and anyone who promises outcomes in this business is either lying or hasn't been doing it long enough to understand what it contains. He looks at you for a long moment. He says he appreciates the honesty. You say you find honesty easier in rooms where the doors are closed. He doesn't laugh. You weren't entirely joking. The operation succeeds. Partially. 2 of the 3 objectives are achieved. The third, the one you cared about most, the one that was the most operationally elegant and the most morally significant, fails because of a variable that no amount of preparation could have controlled, which is the decision of a human being in a moment of pressure, a decision that went the wrong way. You write the after-action report yourself. You are specific about what worked and specific about what didn't and specific about what the failure cost. You send it up the chain. You receive a response that focuses almost entirely on the 2 successes. You file the response and you keep the original document and you read it periodically, not as punishment but as calibration. The standard you hold yourself to is not the standard of the result. It is the standard of the decision-making process, and the decision-making process in the third objective was sound, and the failure was real, and both of these things are true, and you hold both of them simultaneously because that is what this work requires and that is what you have become capable of. By year 15 you have been involved, at varying levels of responsibility, in operations on 5 continents. You have recruited 43 sources over your career. 31 of them are still operational. 4 are dead, 2 of natural causes, 2 of causes that are classified. 6 were exfiltrated and resettled. 2 were blown, and the outcomes of those 2 keep a specific drawer in your mental filing system permanently, slightly, open. You do not think about them every day. You think about them regularly. The distinction matters. What nobody tells you when you are grading papers in Charlottesville at 26 years old is that this work does not end. Not in the sense that the career ends. The career will end, there will be a retirement ceremony, someone will say the right words and you will shake hands and the badge will be returned. But the work itself, the specific rewiring of how you see a room and how you read a face and how you hold information and how you calculate trust, that does not end. You will sit in a restaurant at 62 years old and you will still be, without choosing to, assessing exits. You will still be, in a conversation with someone you care about, listening on 2 levels simultaneously. You will still be, in the quiet at 3 a.m., running the decisions back to the 2-second windows where different choices were available, not because you are tormented but because the machinery doesn't have an off switch and you made peace with that somewhere around year 12. What the work gave you is not what you expected and not what the movies promised. It gave you the knowledge that most of the catastrophes that didn't happen for reasons that will never appear in any history, that the world you move through every day is shaped by operations and assets and decisions made in stairwells and cafes and closed Senate sessions by people whose names you will never read. It gave you the experience of being genuinely useful in the specific way that invisible work is useful, foundationally, structurally, in the load-bearing parts of the architecture that everyone relies on and nobody sees. It gave you an understanding of human motivation that is simultaneously the most valuable thing you own and the thing that makes certain kinds of ordinary connection more difficult than they were before you had it. And it gave you this, the absolute certainty, earned over 15 years of operating in the spaces where probability and consequence and moral weight converge, that the world is more fragile and more resilient than either the optimists or the pessimists believe, that the people inside the machinery are more human and more flawed and more genuinely trying than the cynics will admit, and that the work, the daily, bureaucratic, unglamorous, consequential work of understanding what is happening before it happens and shaping the response before the response becomes a crisis, is the kind of work that requires everything you have and gives back something that cannot be named simply and is not the same as happiness but is not separate from meaning. You are sitting at your desk at Langley on a Thursday afternoon when a colleague stops in your doorway and says there's a candidate coming in next week who tested off the charts, languages, memory, analytical framework, the whole profile. Young. 26. Teaches Arabic at a community college in Virginia. You look up from the assessment you are writing. You say, "Send me the file." You already know what you're going to find in it. You already know what you're going to recommend. The machinery continues. Now, if you made it this far, I want to know, could you do it? Could you live an entire career in the invisible architecture of the world, making decisions that matter to millions of people who will never know your name? Tell me in the comments, and if you want to live inside more worlds like this one, subscribe, because we are just getting started. Like this video if you learned something you didn't know before. And here's the question I'll leave you with. What is the one personality trait you think separates the people who survive this world from the people who don't?